All right, we'll start. We have two decisions. Case 2838, George Harmon, 97 Moses Lane.
Let's see, Kevin, before you do those on 2835, which is 24 Pulaski Street, we should make a motion to reopen the matter and adjourn it.
He's going to
for all
re-advertise
purposes. I discovered when I was looking at the file last month that it needs a variance that hasn't been applied for. So the applicant's attorney is going to amend the application and have it re-advertised.
Let me get the decisions out of the way, and then we'll do that with all the adjournments, all right? 2838, George Harmon.
I make a motion that we approve 2838 as written.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
2840, Peconic Land Trust, 296 Hampton Road.
I make a motion that we approve that as written.
Second.
Okay. 2835, 24 Pulaski Street. We need to move that we reopen that.
That was an aye on the vote for the last one.
What?
Did we vote? No, we just
Oh, we didn't vote? Aye.
Aye.
Sorry about that. 2835, number 24 Pulaski Street, we need to reopen.
I move that we reopen 2835.
For Peconic Land Trust.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now we have four adjournments.
Harmer.
2757, Wickapog Pond Rehab Project. We have a letter requesting adjournment. 2836, the St. Andrew's Dune Church. We have a letter requesting adjournment. 2848, Darien LLC. We have a letter requesting adjournment. And I saw one more somewhere.
Was it 2847?
49 is that?
2847, yes.
Okay.
140 Meadow Lane. We have a letter requesting adjournment. Can I have a motion to adjourn all those?
I move that we adjourn those cases.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, that takes care of about half the agenda. We'll be out of here in 15 minutes. Hopefully. In the first of the old cases is 2845 Judith Guest, 1 First Neck Lane.
Good evening, board members. Wayne Bruin, O'Shea, Marcinson and Bruin for the applicant. This is held over from the last meeting, and at that last meeting there was a request for us to continue to search in the building department records. Just recently, this past week, however, my client with their architect and builder went out to the site and realized the dimensions weren't going to work with the windows and the gutters, and they revised those plans. We did submit them on January 20th to the board. You may all have copies. Essentially, it was increasing the length of the porch by 1.8 feet. I don't think it changes the request. It's still less than the original request. However, with respect to the information that your council has asked for, we were able to get further information today from the building department, and I'll submit copies of those, an original and copies. If you want, I'll just hand one. What we were able to find is, if you know the building department records, they have a record card for each piece of property where there's improvements, and there's 8 individual record cards for the 8 individual units here. They show the history of the application, and on this particular property, you will see that there's a reference on each of the 8 to a certificate of occupancy number 3013, which was issued in November 30th, 1984 for an 8-unit townhouse. That's what's referenced on the record. They were able to give us a copy of that certificate of occupancy, but oddly, the CO actually says 4 dwelling units and 8 garages. So I'm not sure how this all works. There is no other reference to that, but that is as much of the records that they were able to pull. They have been trying for the last month to find the file for this, which apparently is in the basement here, not in any particular order someplace. The building department was looking for that. So, but I believe this is as much of the information we can supply. I've discussed with the village attorney. I don't know if the board has any other further questions or comments.
Got any questions?
No?
Rick?
I think they've exhausted their efforts to search various records, and they have provided the minimum that we need in order to evaluate this. So as far as I'm concerned, we can close it for a decision.
Is there anyone out in the audience like to be heard to this application? No? Can I have a motion to close it for decision?
I move to close for decision.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
On the application of case number 2849, Kenneth and Beth Schwartz, 155 Duck Pond Lane.
We didn't do 2846.
Oh,
Good move.
Throwing no mistakes.
in case anyone doesn't know what we're laughing about, that case is going to take about an hour and a half. Do you mind if we take this other one first? Where's the other attorney?
That's fine.
Okay. So we'll take 2849 first.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I am Vincent Franz, architect for the Schwartz family. When last we met, we discussed the project and were given a memo from Nelson Pope and Voorhees. Mr. Voorhees prepared the memo for us, and we made revisions to the plan and have responded to each of his concerns. I'd be happy to review that, if I may, or responses to that memo. And I'll try to be quick about it. I know there's a long meeting ahead. We've revised the plan to indicate the date that the wetland boundary was flagged and delineated. We have made a few technical corrections with regard to the landscape wetland boundary line. Significantly, we've expanded the native planting area to maintain a minimum of 50 feet. In fact, the native planting area that's being added to the property is significantly more than what is there now, and is, as I say, a minimum of 50 feet. In some areas is greater than that. It was requested that within the wetland landscape setback, that the lawn be replaced with a low-maintenance fescue, and we are doing that. The plan now indicates that we'll be doing that for the whole site. We made a minor change to the specific type of grass, which was that change was thoughtfully proposed after a little bit of research that suggested that we might have a tall fescue as opposed to a red fescue that would do well, be more suitable in direct sun. We've changed a path through the native planting that is no longer lawn but wood chips. We've clarified where the structure wetland setback is. And we provided a comparison table that was requested of us, which we believe shows significantly how things are being improved on the site. The work that we're proposing and the way it's now being proposed, due in part to suggestions of Mr. Voorhees, we feel we'll be leaving the site with respect to the wetland in a much better condition than it is today. And most notably, as I mentioned, is the native planting area, which is being increased by some 600% in terms of square foot area. We will be providing the drainage that was requested. We had a test boring done, by the way, the results of which I have. I don't know if that was submitted, but I can leave copies of that here today. But we had a test boring done that demonstrated good soils and groundwater at a depth of more than 12 feet. So the idea that we might be able to design the required dry wells and drainage for the pool house, for the patio areas, we're confident that we will be able to do that outside of the 125-foot landscape setback. We don't have that designed as of yet because there's a little bit of a catch-22. Mr. Schwartz, would like to not to have to commit to the considerable expense for designing that system until he knows he's actually going to build the pool house. We have a proposal from a local firm to provide those design services. So our hope is that if we can get to an approval of the variances that we seek, that perhaps that approval can be then conditional upon satisfactory design of the required drainage systems. There was a request that we address grading and fill, and hopefully that's been clarified by the memo that I provided to the board and the notes on the plan. And there was a question about a large 28-inch linden tree that perhaps it could be that it could stay. In fact, the tree is not being proposed for removal per se, but rather relocation on the site. Its current location would be in conflict with the pool that we're proposing. The root system would be compromised, and the survival of the tree would be in question. So the Schwartzes have decided, rather than to seek to eliminate the tree, to undertake the significant effort and expense to relocate the tree on the property. The one item that I skipped over is the one thing of the 14, I believe, that has not been addressed head-on, and that is the idea that perhaps the pool might be pushed a little bit farther back from the wetland than it was in the last plan. That's the one thing that hasn't changed in the current plan.
And the drainage plan is part of the wetlands conditions.
I'm sorry. Before we even submitted our formal application to the board, we were pleased to have an opportunity to speak informally with Mr. Voorhees to try to get a heads up as to where this thing may go. And at that time, we got some very useful feedback from Mr. Voorhees, and the result of that feedback was, prior to our submitting this application, we reduced the size of the pool house, increased the distance from the wetland, decreased the distance between the pool and the pool house, and that resulted in the plan that the board has reviewed thus far. Where it stands now is, given the configuration of the allowable building envelope with respect to the bulk zoning regulations and with respect to the wetland setbacks, landscape and structural setbacks, the pool house and the pool are currently essentially horseshoed into the most favorable and available space on the property. So, to be clear, any relocation of the building or the pool, or any reorientation to rotate the building or the pool, would do two things. It would not only would it not improve the separation between the wetlands and the structures that we're discussing, but it would actually recreate some of that which the Schwartzes are going would like to go through considerable effort and expense to eliminate, namely having things like the pool and the existing pool and the pool patio between their home and the pond. They bought the property because they love the pond, they love the view of the pond, and the thing that they are not in love with is the existing patio and pool out there on the lawn in their view of the pond. So, you know, with no question, this effort is about getting the pool out of there. It's about building the pool house that the zoning allows them to build, but trying to do it in a way that minimizes their interference with the Schwartz's enjoyment of the pond as well. So, in short, the pool as shown and the pool house as shown is kind of what it's going to take for the Schwartzes to get that which they are working toward. The pool house, I've been asked to design a pool house that functions in a certain way with respect to their lifestyle and the way they want to use it, and the dollars that they plan to commit to the pool house are toward a certain purpose, objective, and goal. And my client has made it clear to me that, you know, if he had to push the pool house up into the side yard or essentially squish things any further, that it's just not something that's going to meet his objectives. So that's my hopefully not too long-winded way of explaining that we've crunched it as much as works for us, and our hope is that the improvement of the pool's location and the improvement to the site with respect to the various points that were requested on Mr. Voorhees' memo, you know, the natural planting and the lawn and the tree, et cetera, that our hope is that the board will agree that we're leaving the site in a better place with respect to the wetland than it is today.
The pool and the pool house are 35 feet off the southerly lot line, is that correct?
Yes, a little more.
Supposed to be how many feet, 30?
35,
35. So they don't need a variance?
not for
Pool and
that.
pool house do not need a variance,
No,
the setback.
nope,
The pool is now 114 feet from the wetlands, whereas before it was 104 feet.
that's right,
So you've increased that by 10.
that's right.
Okay, we have a letter here from an attorney who represents a neighbor to the south. They're objecting to the pool, but the pool is in a conforming location.
That's correct. There's nothing about the zoning, the building envelope that that requires any variance.
We talked about, you know, sliding the pool and the pool house back towards the house, but they increased the buffer by quite a bit in front of that area. I wanted your opinion on that.
Yes, I will certainly say that I think that the resubmission is responsive to the comment letter that we provided for the last meeting. And I think that the table helps in particular, because not only is the pool being moved 10 additional feet, but the surface area within the 125-foot setback area is being decreased substantially. So, you know, I think that they were challenged to meet some design objectives. I like the increased buffer, certainly. And when you look at it on balance, there's quite a bit of lawn in that area now that would be removed and replaced with a good natural buffer area of planting, shrubs, ground cover, appropriate native species. So as I said, I think they've been responsive. I did have one question about the note with respect to the septic system, because we do have a sanitary system setback. It seems a little vague just in terms of the driveway. The note says, subject to change depending on septic location and septic location not on survey. So that's something that, because we have a 200-foot sanitary setback, probably have to have a little more detail in terms of where it is and is it conforming or is it just staying?
So the note on the plan that refers to the driveway possibly being needing a little massaging there and the septic not being on the survey. That note pertains to the primary septic system for the main residence, which is in the front of the house.
Okay.
So that's actually really not germane to this discussion. However,
In that case, it should be over 200 feet.
it'd be well over 200 feet. But there's a valid concern that you're expressing because the pool house is going to have a septic system as well. And at this time, it's not known to us as the design team whether that pool house is going to make use of the existing septic or more than likely get a new small septic system that's specific to the pool house. But that system obviously would need to be approved by the Department of Health and would need to be outside of the 200-foot setback, et cetera. So, again, I don't know if we can put notes, if it would satisfy all concerned, if we can put notes on there that acknowledge the fact that we have to have the septic system outside that 200-foot distance, but not commit to actually designing the system yet. I mean, again, that's that catch-22 I alluded to earlier. If the Schwartzes can be confident or comfortable that they're going to get the variance and be able to build the pool house, it makes it a lot easier to spend the money on the drainage system and the septic design, I mean. So would it be satisfactory to address your concern by saying pool house septic system located outside? We could even graphically indicate the area?
We haven't talked about the drainage either, and it is a little bit atypical to not have something, a little more specific on the plan.
Okay.
I can only speak with respect to, my perspective on the wetlands, and as I said, I'm satisfied that this is an improvement
Okay.
over existing conditions. What the board does ultimately is up to the board,
Okay.
but we typically would look for plans to depict exactly what's going to take place so that we know that it is consistent, that the depth to groundwater works, and all of the things that you talked about with respect to the test hole.
Okay.
So, I don't know what the board's pleasure is, but that's what we typically have, is the detail.
So if he designates an area on this at the location for future septic, and it's outside the 200 foot, then that's fine. Then you just need gutter drainage for dry
Yeah,
wells?
I mean, Vincent indicated that the drainage would be outside, I think even the 150 foot, but certainly outside the 125 foot.
I mean, currently there are some dry wells shown.
I see that.
They're not designed dry wells, but there are at least 3 of them indicated outside of the setback
It looks
requirement.
like perhaps a pool dry well, and then 2 additional ones for the pool.
Storm.
Pool house.
Right.
Proposed pool house.
And then west of the pool house is an area that, again, based on the size of the area, based on the pool house sanitary load, and based on the results of the test boring, there's an area that we're optimistic can, certainly has a strong potential to accommodate that pool house septic system. So, but again, I mean, whatever the board decides is necessary, I mean, it seems like, there's a favorable response to the changes and efforts that we've made, and, whatever it takes. I mean, you understand where I'm coming from. I mean, it makes it a lot easier to engineer those things with greater precision if we know we have a building. It would be certainly unfortunate to go through the expense, time, energy, et cetera, to design a septic system, to design, scientifically storm drainage systems, and then to find that the variance is denied. So your guidance would be much appreciated in that regard.
The catch-22 is really by your own design. It's not a
That's true.
catch-22 for this board.
Right, and if that's what's required,
but-
then I want to hear that.
That being said, if it meets the setbacks and it's demonstrated, then, it meets it. It doesn't require any relief or even any consideration other than to ensure that it conforms to those setbacks. So I'm not exactly sure how to proceed. I kind of asked Rick before if we could do it with a condition in the permit, but I think perhaps, maybe a note on the plan or something of that nature unless the board wants to seek the detailed design at this time. So I think Vincent's observations are accurate that, just from an environmental perspective and from a wetland setback perspective, it's an improvement. And this would get my recommendation at this time.
Am I understanding what you're saying is that the drainage plan you're looking for will not involve any work within the wetlands area? Or it will?
It won't.
I see one dry well that's between 125 and 150. I'm not sure if it's a patio dry well or if it's a pool drainage dry well. We would look for both. And I see two dry wells near the pool house that are in excess of 150 feet. Those are subsurface, beyond the structure setback, so I don't see an issue with those two. So,
Anything that's going to be beyond the area within which you need a wetland special permit, can be covered by notes or conditions. But to the extent that something is missing that's going to be within the wetlands regulated area, we need a complete.
We're not proposing drainage or septic within the regulated area. In fact, my understanding is that's not an option. I mean, I can't imagine coming here and asking for that.
I think that's okay too.
Do you want any more details on that? Or is it?
If it were placed in that location, I think it would be okay.
Meaning outside the protected area?
Yes.
Yeah. So again, I mean, it would be easy to put a note on the plan indicating
That's
that
okay.
our intention is to put those components, those systems, outside the regulated area.
Sounds okay to me.
Yeah.
You're comfortable
I'm
with it?
Okay?
Yeah, cool, yeah.
This letter in opposition I will enter into the file, but they're complaining that the pool house and pool result in noise, place an aesthetic barrier near her property, and result in a financial loss. But as I said, the pool is in conforming location, so is the pool house.
Yeah, all of that is allowable under the zoning, so I
I just
don't know
wanted
what
you to
to
know
say.
that we had this letter, and
Let
I
me
will put it in the
just
file.
correct one thing that you said also. You're not asking for a variance, you're asking for a wetland special permit.
Thank you.
So I wanted to correct that because you used the word variance and they're different standards.
Thank you very much. I think there's also a letter, do you have a letter from a neighbor in support?
I haven't seen it, no, unless it came in since the work session.
So this application is 155 Duck Pond Lane and 156. Thank you very much. And there's multiple copies here, but this is 156. To whom it may concern, we are neighbors of 155 Duck Pond Lane, residing at 156 Duck Pond Lane ourselves, and have reviewed the application dated December 8th, 2014, and are in support of it. Apologies for the lateness of our email. We were traveling overseas during the latter half of December, returned this week. Sincerely, Kurtna Pai and Ashit Mehta. And so they are next-door neighbors.
You want that in the file? Give me one
Please.
copy, I'll put it in the file anyway.
No, excuse me.
This way, I'm sorry.
Is there anyone out in the audience who'd like to be heard of this application? Jeff, are we gonna close it for decision?
Those are for decision, then.
I move we close for the season.
90 seconds? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks for bringing us on the schedule.
Now we'll go to case 2846, EAM 40 Meadow Lane.
I believe I asked for an adjournment the last time, but Mr. Bordino, I just want to make sure, to respond to the
Where's the other attorney?
comments of that Mr. Bordino and his team had at the last meeting, so, why don't- let me go get it. They're getting it. Want to do the next one? Your calendar. I don't know what to say.
They're
Where
not
is
ready.
And the engineer on his team said that he's in the hallway, so she's going to go get him,
Okay. So we'll wait a few minutes for him, is that the idea?
I guess.
Want to do the next case?
Much more in this case.
Very well. We can do the next case, I guess.
David Stone.
2851, David Steinberg, 32 North Woolley Street.
What number was that? 281?
2851.
David Steinberg, right?
It's you, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Siu Liu. I'm the architect for David Steinberg. Last time we adjourned because the board asked me to reduce the size of the house so we can avoid the 36 square foot that we previously asked. That's beyond the allowable GFA, and I put the drawings in before the work section, and the places that bubbled are the reduction. Basically, it's very easy. We just actually push the whole front of the house back by 6 inches because the house is about 40 feet wide. So by doing that, we reduce 36 square foot. This is a drawing that I was submitted. You see the bubbled area? That's the place where I reduce.
Can you speak up a little bit, because I'm having trouble hearing?
Oh, okay. I submitted the floor plans, and you can see the front of the house is pushed back 6 inches. This is the first floor and the second floor. And therefore, on the site plan, you can see the distance from the street is greater. But that's not really the concern here. I think the concern is to reduce the size of the house. So the variance that we are asking would be only the 2 feet that towards the side of the street of North Woolley. So we won't ask for the 36 square foot additional GFA. Did I make myself clear?
It is a new one.
Yeah, that's on January 8th. I'm trying to compare it to what we had before.
It's a half a foot, 6 inches, right? 6 inches off the street, pushback.
To reduce the size of the house,
Yeah, yeah.
6 inches in the front,
Right.
push back. So I don't need to ask that 36 square foot anymore.
From North Woolley, though, she said, right?
The pushback is on the Pulaski side.
It's on the
Okay, yes,
on
this
this
is
side.
34.9, and it was 34.5. So about 6 inches you moved it back, and that gave you the 36 square feet? Okay.
Because the house is about 40 feet.
There's no issue with it.
was the only issue we had, wasn't it?
That's what we talked about.
I think she said that they revised the plans so that they now conform with gross floor area, but I
Yeah,
couldn't hear
correct.
you.
Yes, correct,
Okay, so you're withdrawing your request for gross floor area variance.
correct.
So we're down to a front yard variance to 23.1 feet from
Northwood.
North Woolley Street. That remains the same.
Yes.
Okay, I think we have what we asked for.
Seems that way. Do we have any other questions?
I don't know.
Anybody out in the audience like to hear of this application? Want to close the decision?
Okay?
I move to close for decision.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye. Are these guys here?
I guess he's back now, right?
Yeah. I guess
You all set? Okay. Now we're up to 284640 Meadow Lane.
I believe we asked for an adjournment to be able to respond. So I seek your permission, your board's permission.
Are we asking for adjournment now?
No. We asked,
Could you please go to the microphones? I can't hear you.
procedurally, it appeared that the appellant had presented his evidence, so we asked for an adjournment to respond, so I thought it would be appropriate that we do so first. Oh, okay.
You're going to respond.
Yes. So, I'm handing up an original report, and I've asked Bailey Larkin, my associate, to hand out reports to the board members, and to Mr. Voorhees, I have one from Mr. My name is John Bennett, and I, from the firm of Bennett and Reed, and we represent the property owner, EAM 40 Meadow Lane, and with me this evening is Bailey Larkin, my associate, and some other gentlemen which will
Got the file on.
I will identify. In response to comments raised in Mr. Guardino's letter of December 17th, 2014, and testimony presented at the December 18th, 2014 public hearing, a Leonard Jackson report submitted by the Southampton Association, we have submitted a written response and multiple reports from experts demonstrating that the proposed home at 40 Meadow Lane complies with the requirements of the Village Code, Chapter 62, all applicable New York State Building Code provisions, and FEMA regulations. I have here with me tonight several experts who will share their findings. I'm sure that you will find them most convincing. With me this evening is Dr. Mohammed Debourgnia, a consulting professional engineer on this project, who is with W.F. Baird & Associates, an international coastal engineering firm. He'll tell you a little bit about his 29 years of experience in coastal engineering. Amongst his other credentials is he does have a Ph.D. in coastal engineering. Nat Appenheimer, a professional engineer and the executive vice president of Robert Silman Associates, the structural engineers who designed the 40 Meadow Lane home. Mr. Oppenheimer has 26 years experience as an engineer. Mr. Stephen Lemansky, a professional engineer, a local engineer with 34 years experience, who designed the proposed breakaway landscape walls, which are the walls that are about 3 feet from the perimeter of the property. Drew Bennett, a consulting professional engineer on this project with 30 years experience. He was also at the December public hearing. He's also the East Hampton and Sagaponack Village engineer. I hate to break it to you guys, but amongst all of you, you have 119 years of engineering experience. Sorry to put it that way, but as I mentioned, all the findings have been documented in written form, which you have in front of you, and I'm going to ask Mr. Debourgnia and Mr. Oppenheimer, Mr. Lemansky, and Mr. Bennett to present their findings to the board, and they, as well as Stuart Diston from Austin Patterson Diston and Tim Rump from Aries Designs, who are also involved in the project, will present will be available for any questions if you have them. They've testified before, both of them, not only at the variance hearing, which gave rise to the request for these landscaping walls for privacy for the adjacent neighbors, but at the prior ARB and Zoning Board of Appeals hearings. Just taking a little step out of the typical homiletics directives, I'm going to tell you what we're going to tell you before we tell it to you. We're going to show you is a flood event. What we're going to show you at first is a flood event. It's a flood event that FEMA expects, that FEMA anticipates, and a flood event that FEMA created its regulations to respond to. So these regulations that FEMA created, and which are embodied in Chapter 62 of your local zoning code, flood damage prevention code sections, are the result of what a flood event actually looks like. We'll show you a narrative of the flooding, show you that the narrative of the flooding proposed by the appellant is simply inaccurate. We'll also demonstrate to you unequivocally that, one, all of the walls, both the walls under the house and the landscaping walls to the east and west of the house, approximately 3 feet off the property line, which, by the way, again, were provided as this board agreed at the variance stage of this project to aid in privacy, are breakaway walls. And this is so, particularly as it relates to the walls that are not underneath the house. This is so even though by reason of specific language in the state building codes, only the walls underneath the house are required to be breakaway. That's section R324.3.4 of the New York State Residential Building Code. That's the only requirement. The only requirement that walls be breakaway are for the walls underneath the house. However, we have designed walls that are breakaway on the perimeters of the house. We're also going to demonstrate too the placement of sand. Now, this was a big contention of all of the experts of the appellant. But we're going to demonstrate that the placement of sand, non-structural fill against these walls does not at all impede the passage of water underneath the house as required pursuant to FEMA during a flood event. We're going to show you this, and it shouldn't come as a surprise to you, because that has been the practice of the building department in the village of Southampton since the FEMA regulations came to the village of Southampton. You cannot find a home in the village of Southampton, including whether or not in the A zone or the V zone. So, you know, you can't find a home in the village of Southampton that looks like the homes in West Hampton Beach, where you have nothing between the lowest structural member and the grade. All of the homes, including the appellant's homes, have fill up to the first floor. So that's what has happened in this village, and there's no reason to suggest that there's nothing wrong with it, and we'll demonstrate that to you unequivocally. So the sand does not create any of the issues raised by Leonard Jackson Associates or Ms. Paranto. We'll also show you that a pool is clearly allowed at a lower elevation when appropriately engineered, and this will be unequivocally demonstrated by our experts. We'll also show you that stair enclosures are permitted below the base floodplain elevations. Now, it's very important to see what's gone on here. The applicants have tried to confuse this board in a couple of ways. They've talked about guidelines and recommendations and FEMA bulletins as if they were part of the village code or FEMA regulations. This is simply not the case. What we're going to talk to you about is the state building code, FEMA regulations, and local codes, local FEMA codes. And most important, and this is very, very important, they've tried to confuse the board by touting these certain safe harbor and certain construction designs as the only method of providing compliance with FEMA. FEMA says if you do it this way, you don't have to worry about it. If you design certain things in a certain way, you don't have to worry about how they're engineered. This is a very, very sophisticatedly designed and engineered house. So it meets all the performance design standards, and we'll demonstrate that to you. These safe harbors that the appellant are relying on offer a simplistic and easy approach to FEMA compliance, but each one of the safe harbors states that if the construction is engineered to meet with the performance guidelines, they satisfy FEMA, and we're going to show that to you unequivocally tonight. Our experts have gone great lengths to analyze this project and come great distances tonight to demonstrate our findings. What you'll see this evening from the property owner is hard data, not as with the Leonard Jackson report, for example, mere conclusions. So I'd like to introduce to you as our first expert, Dr. Mohamed Debojnia, who's going to talk to you about what actually happens during a flood event.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, board members. It's an honor to be here today and speak to you. As Mr. Bennett mentioned, I got my PhD in 1990. I'm Mohamed Debojnia. I got my PhD in 1991 from the University of Tokyo in Japan. Japan being an island, you know, it's very advanced in coastal engineering, so that's the appropriate place to study. I did work for the lead marine construction company in Japan, Penta Ocean, for 2 years. Then I was invited back to university. I was associate professor for 8 years in the University of Tokyo, teaching all sorts of coastal engineering courses and doing research on wave sediment transport and advising students. I've been working in Canada for Baird & Associates, which is a coastal engineering company, since 2001. Combined altogether, I have 29 years of experience in this field. At Baird, I have worked on a variety of projects, including beach erosion, storm surge calculations, cyclones, harbor sedimentation, field investigations, coastal zone management, hazard assessment, environmental assessment, and so on. Just a little bit about Baird is an international coastal engineering company. We work all around the world. We have a lot of projects in the United States, in South America, in Latin America, in the Middle East, and we do design, of course, design of ports, design of beaches, design of structures. We also do investigations. We deploy instruments. We measure waves, currents, winds, etc. We have done, for example, all the modeling for FEMA on 3 of the Great Lakes, Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, and Lake Michigan, so that they use those and set their regulations. We have made policies for Ministry of Natural Resources in Canada for Lake Ontario and I believe other lakes. So we are very familiar with this subject that is on the table today. And on my way in the plane today I'm coming from Toronto, I was looking at my affidavit, and I found it's addressing several detailed issues without giving a clear idea of what's the big picture. So I thought maybe instead of going through my affidavit one by one, I'll start by talking about a storm so that it connects all the dots and gives us a kind of an answer all at once through that story. Now, this property is located in FEMA V-Zone. As you know, FEMA V-Zone defines what's called base flood elevation, and that includes the water level plus the waves on top of that. So the height, the water level plus the wave, half of the wave height in technical terms, which is up to the crest of the waves. So the 16 feet that has been defined, it's such an elevation. Now, just to put it in perspective, Southampton, I think during Sandy, you guys got about 6 feet of surge. And the tidal range is not that much here. It's less than 4 feet. So you put those two together, you are still at 10 feet. So 16 feet is really a big storm. That's why it's called one in 100 years. So it has to be a storm that directly comes towards Southampton. It's a very rare event, but that's what FEMA has decided, that it has a probability of once in 100 years. So what kind of storm would that be? Assume you are staying on the beach and enjoying the waves and the weather, and you hear that there's a storm coming. As I said, to get to those kind of elevations, this storm has to come right towards Southampton. So what happens, you start to feel the winds, then you start to see the waves coming. They are not that big, but as time passes, because the storm is coming this way and the winds are working, they push the water up, and that's what everyone knows is called the storm surge. So you see that the waves are working on the beach, trying to erode it, create some scarp, but at the same time the water level is going up, and the waves are getting bigger. As you are trying to see what's happening, but still the water level is going up and up until we get really to the peak, and now the storm surge is quite high. If you are lucky, maybe you at the same time you face the low tide, but it is a 1 to 100 year event. So perhaps they consider that with that storm surge, you are also getting the high tide. And then you know that we have a spring tide and nip tide. Every 2 weeks, the tides are larger and smaller. So you also get the spring tide. So everything is kind of adding up, and perhaps there's a lower pressure in the air. So again, that causes the difference in we call those synoptic phenomena. Some location on the ocean is higher pressure. Here is lower pressure. Again, that pushes the water up. So it goes up and up until we reach that. Now, as I said, 16 feet includes the waves, perhaps 13, 14 feet high. And the dune at this location, I actually visited this afternoon, is at about 22. So basically, the water comes to the chest of the dune because of all those factors that I mentioned, and also the winds that are very strong now and pressuring the water towards the dune. On top of that, as the storm is developing, it's building waves or generating waves offshore. And waves, they are generated offshore and they start to propagate towards the shore. If you are standing on the beach still, you'll see that it starts with the smaller waves, shorter waves, what we call short period waves, because those travel faster. So you see smaller waves coming. By period, I mean if you measure the time between the first crest and second crest. You see those are arriving first. As time passes, the period becomes longer. The real waves, those that FEMA is considering that will erode the dune and the beach, will come at the end. Now the water is quite high to the chest of the dune, larger waves are coming. So it is at this point that the run-up of those waves, when they hit the dune, is kind of reaching the top of the crest of the dune, or the top of the dune. During the run-up, we have uprush and downrush. Uprush will push the sand up, wash over the dune. The downrush will erode the sand down and take it offshore. So this will continue until the dune top is kind of, shouldn't say beheaded, but it's short, it's going down. And then now the water can get past the dune and flow or overwash the dune. Once this starts, this is what we call, we say the dune has been breached. So as soon as this starts, now you have a little water flowing over the dune. This starts to even erode the dune more. It creates a channel. Now, once you have a channel, it starts to erode it from both sides and from the bottom. This now becomes very fast. Now, how many points the dune may breach? It depends. The dune height is variable. You may see it at few locations. The wave height offshore is also variable. Some places higher, some places lower. So it's unlikely that the entire dune will be overwashed, but you'll see at a few locations that the dune is breached. Water starts to flow behind the dune. Now, what's going on behind the dune? Behind the dune is I can show, for example, here at this location, this is the dune. It's hard to see, but this is the 16 feet elevation. So you see there's a dip behind the dune, and there's all this land which is dry. So basically, when the flow starts, and this is what is called perhaps flood water, when it starts fill the area behind the dune, it's not like now you get a flow of water that that's very fast and is damaging or destroying everything. We have overflow, for example, in dams. In dams, you have overflow, and then there's a sharp, steep slope, and that causes what we call supercritical flow, which is very fast. Sometimes it creates cavity. It takes the concrete off, the slab, the spillway, as it's called. But here you have an area which is empty, almost flat, with some holes. So the water will start to fill essentially the area behind. That's the flood water. So you start to get water in your house or in your property. Now, interestingly enough, in this case, the two neighboring properties are slightly higher, about I think at 12, and this one is at 7, the grade, so about 5 feet higher. So the water would definitely first go into this property, and then it will start to flow and make progress landborne. Now, when water is faced with an obstacle, say you have a pile, it's not gonna think it's very busy flowing or smart. It just, when it hits a pile, it just goes around it and continue. What happens is that around the pile, the velocity, the speed, becomes slightly higher, what we call it contraction of streamlines. So it goes faster around the pile and then gets back and continue its way. That's why you have to kind of design some scour protection around the pile. Same is with a structure. Now the water is behind the dune, going towards any structure, like, for example, this pool. This is the south view of the property, and this is the subject swimming pool. It's about this. The grade level +7 is here, and the pool is kind of somehow obstructing the flow of water. So when water sees the pool, it starts to find a way to go to the other side in the shortest with the shortest least effort and shortest distance. It just starts to find any hole under the pool to get underneath, and it also starts to find a way to go around it. Water doesn't think, when it sees the pool, it doesn't think, okay, let me go to check the neighboring properties. It finds or it selects the shortest distance. It follows the hydraulic laws and go around the house and continues its progress. Now, and of course, everywhere becomes flooded, depending on elevation. Now, for waves which are or have eroded the dune, waves can propagate only if there is water. So initially, when the dune is just breached and there is no water behind, of course, there is no waves. Once you have a certain level of water now, and the dune has been eroded further down, the waves start to coming. Now, these waves, these are, as I said, these are long period waves. These are storm waves. These are waves that have destroyed houses. These are waves that can break masonry walls. So these are strong waves. FEMA V-zone says the waves in V-zone is larger than 3 feet. Roughly with the depth and all sort of calculation here, you can easily have 4 feet of waves here. The important thing is the period, because storm waves are long periods, say 10-second, 12-second periods, as is usual. So a 4 feet wave, 10-second period is a very powerful wave. Once there's enough water, they start to propagate into property. They will interact with any structures that's there, and the breakaway walls, of course, will start to break. There's another function by the waves, and that is, I don't want to get too technical, but the wave motion is back and forth. It doesn't have a net, usually a net movement, but because of that back and forth motion, it agitates all the sediment. It puts the sediment, it entrains the sediment, and then that sediment is very easy to be carried away. So once the waves are there, any sediment of the nature of the sediment that is in the sea would be easily agitated and washed away. Same is for the small dune that it's not dune, but fill that is supposed or proposed to be put swimming pool. It's a very tiny, like compared to the dune itself, which has been washed away, this is almost nothing. So those waves will easily wash these away and get under the structure, and they will destroy the breakaway walls. Now, what has been, I was watching the video from the last hearing last night, and what is very much emphasized is that the waves may get diverted, the floodwaters may get diverted and damage neighboring properties. So what happens for the floodwaters I just explained, it's just going around the house. It's not going and checking the neighbors. For the waves, waves are coming from ocean or perhaps at an angle toward this property. They will hit the pool. Now, when waves hit a structure or an obstacle, there are three processes that happen. One is transmission. They try to pass through that, underneath, over, sides. But there is a part that is right, kind of attacking the pool face or wall. That part is called reflected, is called reflection. It's reflected back. So the wave energy is either transmitted or is reflected back, or at the two edges, it's called radiation or diffraction. So some wave energy may kind of radiate from both ends of the pool. Now, these are, of course, all important processes. The important thing to notice is you have a 10-second wave or 12-second wave. The wavelengths, what we call is the, well, if you are in the ocean and you measure from the crest of this wave to the next wave, that's the distance. That for the wavelengths for a 10-second wave in deep ocean is about 450, 500 feet. When it comes to shallow water in this area or in the depths that we are talking around this house, it will be between 150 to 200 feet. Now, wavelengths defines the scale of the wave motion. So we have a motion of water, if it is back and forth, but it's happening over 150 to 250 lengths. In such a case, you are putting a 40 feet pool into that wave motion. Whatever happening is just is not complete, is partial. Even reflection, even diffraction, everything is just not the size of wave. It's too small for that wave to change it significantly. So, and the obstacle itself is not full. It's not a wall all the way down to the floor or to the ground. There is a big gap underneath, allowing the wave energy to transmit underneath. So there is partial transmission, there is partial reflection, and reflection is not a bad thing for neighboring properties because it's reflecting back everything to the ocean. It's not diverting it to the neighboring properties. And the amount of radiation and diffraction from the sides, again, because of the small size of the pool, is negligible. So these waves are going to break the breakaway walls, are going to mess everything around, are going to move the sediment, are going to be difficult to deal with, but they are not going to kind of be reflected or diffracted or diverted towards the neighboring properties. I think that was basically all what I was trying to say. If you have any question, I'll be more than happy to answer. Or I don't know if I missed anything, I can add right away.
One question I have, because you deal the storm is attacking this piece of property.
Yes.
And what's going to happen? But won't it be happening, attacking the house on the left and the property on the right? It's going to happen all the way down the beach.
Yes.
So you have that water to contend with too, and those breakthroughs. So, because you talk about this water confined to this property and not deflecting to the neighbor's property, but they got their own water problem.
That's correct. That's correct. I'm trying to say that what happens in this property is not going to impact or accelerate or enhance the forces or the damage to other property. These are, as you said, they have their own water, and that's a different issue. This property is not going to affect those properties because of its design as it is.
Anything else, Doctor?
No, I'm
And in addition to Dr. DeBunjo's oral testimony tonight, there's an affidavit that is part of the submission. Is quite a detailed affidavit demonstrating the fact that these sands will not be any sort of impediment to the waters going underneath the building, or will they cause any damage to the adjacent properties. Then I wanted to thank you, Doctor. Thank you. If Nat Oppenheimer could come up, he's a professional engineer, as we discussed, president of Robert Stillman Associates. These were the structural engineers who designed the 40 Meadow Lane home.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak before you. I appreciate the opportunity. I just got a promotion for Mr. Bennett. I'm the executive vice president at Robert Stillman Associates. I appreciate that, John. I've been with the firm since 1988. Bob Stillman, one of his very first projects was a Robert Stern house in the Hamptons. We've done, I believe, over 300 houses out in this area of Long Island. Very familiar with the area over the last 49 years, and I personally have probably worked on over 150 houses in Long Island. So we're a firm very well versed in this type of work. We've done many, many houses in both A and V zones throughout Long Island and the East Coast. As Mr. Bennett mentioned, we are the structural engineers of record on the house, so it's our responsibility for any of the structures directly related to the house, and I want to speak to that tonight. So the basic premise underlying all of the FEMA regulations, and Mr. Bennett mentioned this, but I want to reiterate it. There is the prescriptive portion of the code, or guidelines, which is very clear that if you're a homeowner and you don't want to hire an engineer or you want to understand it in general terms, you can build your house with certain details and not worry about it. And the basic underlying principles, I think everyone knows, but just to reiterate or put what I'm about to say into context, is simply that your house doesn't do damage, the structure of it, what we care about is the structure of it, doesn't break away in any big chunks that do damage to your neighbors. So large pools don't become detached, and so on and so forth, and that the house itself remains intact. So the prescriptive guidelines give a general approach that if you let the water flow under the house freely, it's less likely to pull your entire house structure down and send it off as sort of a floating object. We engineer these houses all the time. And FEMA gives, within their guidelines, very specific engineering rules for designing to withstand the forces of the waves and so on for any structure that exists below the flood line, the design flood elevation. So regardless of how open you leave your house, you're going to have piles coming up and so on, and you have to make sure that debris won't break the piles, that the wave action hits those piles are okay. This is something we do all the time. The basic point is that there's a weak link, that water, something will always give way before the house does. So on a number of projects in the past, and two that I can point to directly that were built in high-profile areas and approved by FEMA, we sat directly with FEMA representatives at the time, a house in Greenwich, Connecticut, and a public golf course in Keogh Island, South Carolina. The exact same detail we used at this house was presented to FEMA officials, approved, and the projects are built. In the letter that was provided to you tonight, we have photos of the built projects. In the Keogh Island Ocean Club golf course, there is I think it's about 12 to 13 foot tall breakaway CMU wall, similar to the one we see at 40 Meadow Lane, that supports earth load, so it prevents the earth from just sloughing under the house in an everyday static condition with no storm. But in a storm condition, it breaks away. And that is a very straightforward calculation which we've supplied to you. The storm action and the water force adds up to about 6 times the soil force. So the calculation is a very straightforward one where we can demonstrate to the building department, which we did, and we can demonstrate to FEMA officials, as we have in the past, that the soil force is minimal relative to the water force. So in everyday life, the non-1 in 100 event, the soil is held back by this wall, but this wall is not indestructible. That when this wave and this event that Dr. von Baer discussed comes onto the site, the walls cannot hold back that water, and that's the entire purpose. They are the weak links, so that the force of the wave, the force of the water, does not impart itself onto the main house structure and carry the house with it. And that we've proven through calculations we've submitted to you, and it's a very clear and straightforward calculation. It is not subject to prescriptive rules and does not necessarily, and is something that we stand behind as the engineer of record.
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask you, there was some claim made at the last hearing that because there's more than just mortar and cinder block, as I would call it, in this wall, there is some steel in this wall, that it wasn't a breakaway. Could you respond to that?
Yeah, that was the final point of that discussion. So by doing these calculations, we've proved very clearly through basic engineering principles that even though the wall has reinforcing in it, that reinforcing is designed to fail under this water load. And again, we can get into all sorts of discussions very specifically about exactly what that water load is. FEMA defines it. I don't think they would provide an engineer with all these rules on how to develop the force of a wave if they didn't intend us to use it to confirm that these walls break away. In the prescriptive section of the FEMA code, they say if you build a masonry wall, don't put reinforcing in, which is a smart thing to do if you're not doing the engineering on it. But if we do the engineering on it, we can prove that the wall works with reinforcing for soil, but not with water. So again, it's not a foregone conclusion that you can't have reinforcing in a breakaway wall. We've proved that with the calculations we submitted to you.
Did you have reinforcing in those other projects that you described?
We had reinforcing in Greenwich. At Kiowa, we had a wider block, but there was discussion of reinforcing back and forth. It wasn't objected by FEMA. The builder down in Kiowa Island wanted to do it unreinforced. It wasn't a regulation or somebody saying we couldn't. It was just a building choice. It surprised us, actually, because the builder down there wanted to carry the heavier 12-inch block, which most builders don't want to deal with. They wanted to do it down there. The other two main points that I want to make on our design that the appellant brought up was the issue of the pool being under the design flood elevation as not being allowed. Again, we absolutely disagree with that. We designed a pool house in Mid-Island, I think Oyster Bay, I can't remember the exact township, I believe Oyster Bay, that was 100% under the design flood elevation. It was designed to support the wave force on it. It was on a bed of piles. It is not something most people do based on a cost-prohibitive idea, but it was absolutely engineered and approved by the local building department and FEMA officials. In this case, we have a pool that's partially submerged below the design flood, and we've submitted calculations to you demonstrating that the piles that are directly under the pool, separate from the rest of the house, can support the force of the wave hitting the pool. So again, the main objective is that the pool doesn't dislodge and do damage to any of the neighbors. We've engineered it to be stable and secure in a storm event, and we've proved that again with calculations that we've submitted to the board.
Is the pool a separate, truly separate structure from the house?
Yes, it's entirely separated. So the foundation under the pool and the pool shell itself is separated from terraces, decks, and the rest of the main house. So it, in and of itself, can withstand the force of the wave as defined by FEMA, not made up by us, not made up by any other engineer. It is defined by FEMA and given to us.
So the way that pool is constructed, you have pilings, and then you build a grade beam around the pilings.
Right.
And then you run the steel from the grade beam right up into the structure of the pool, so it's one integral.
Right.
Okay.
And so the pool shell and everything is designed to take that force and dialed in, so any uplift from the water under is taken into account, and it does not detach and break away as an object. The final piece that the appellant made comment about was the main stair of the house. That too is below the main walking surface for the stair going up is below the flood elevation the same exact way as the pool, although it's not separated from the main house. What we've shown in calculations we've submitted to you is that the wave action again hits the stair. The stair is sufficient structurally to support that that wave action, so it does not break or fail, and then that the force of the water on that stair is then taken into the main house structure, which has this capacity among all the piles in the house to support that water action in that case. So again, each of these components are unique and distinct. They're recognized and defined by FEMA. We've responded with hard engineering, not hard like difficult, but just clear and concise engineering calculations that we've submitted to you, proving that these things meet FEMA regulations and work. And the final point I'd make is that there was some language used in the Jackson report, I believe, about the action of the wave under the house and not getting trapped and so on. Any discussion we've had with FEMA officials in the past on any of these houses have never, to the point that was made in the previous testimony, have never considered sort of these very odd storms where the water gets just under your house but nothing's happening in the surrounding area and things aren't breaking away and so on. By the time this storm has breached the dunes, there's other action going on around the house at the site, and the discussions with FEMA has always been that the water's coming from outside. That's the way the regulations are written. And while I respect that there may be some water moving around, there's a lot of other things going around at the same time, and I think that, again, going back to the basic principle of the weak link, as long as in that action, if you think about it, that weak link idea, if that water is trapped under the house, it is not trying to move the house off its moorings anyway. It's about the water coming all around and the walls breaking away in that condition and letting the sand slough in. So again, I very much appreciate the opportunity to present the rigorous design that was behind this house. There was no rules of thumb used and so on. This was a well engineered house, as we've done, as I said, on numerous houses in the Hamptons, and a lot of the houses we're very proud of. So I'm staying around until the end to see if there are any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nat. Then I would like to ask Mr. Stephen Lemansky to come up, and Mr. Lemansky designed the breakaway walls on the perimeter to retain the soil for the vegetative buffer for privacy that the board wanted. As you know, Mr. Lemansky is a local engineer with 30 years of experience, and not only designing but constructing homes, including quite a few on the Atlantic Ocean.
Are those breakaway walls too, the retaining walls?
Yes, they are. The retaining walls are. They're not, well, they're not, as previously discussed, they have just enough strength to retain the soil, but they are breakaway. Oh, I'll let Steve.
Well, the reason I'm saying is the other expert says that only the walls under the house have to be breakaway.
No. What I said when I started was that by law, under section R324.3.4 of the New York State Residential Building Code, only the walls that are underneath the house, directly underneath the house, are required to be breakaway.
All right, but you can build the other ones breakaway also if you'd like.
And we have,
okay, that's
yeah,
all right.
and indeed we have.
For the record, Steve Lemansky. I worked with Tim Rumpf of Aris Design, who was the landscape architect for the project, to prepare a design for the retaining walls for the soil. I've submitted calculations that you have that show two things. One is that under the soil load, the lightly reinforced walls that we have will hold the soil, but under a storm surge, the walls will break away. So the walls that we have designed will break away.
So again, even though they're not required to be breakaway walls.
There you go. Let's go home.
Understand this statement. They will nevertheless break away. Any questions for Mr. Lemansky? Again, his report and his calculations, as with the Silman report and calculations, have been given to you. And then finally, if Mr. Drew Bennett is here with me, I think we figured out, it turns out we share a great-great-grandfather. So we haven't had him here. In any event, as you know, Mr. Bennett was present at the November-December public hearing. He is an engineer with 30 years of experience, and he's the village engineer for the village of East Hampton and Sagaponic.
Good evening, Drew Bennett, consulting engineer doing business at 3 Railroad Avenue in East Hampton. The opposition is arguing that fill is not permitted by FEMA. We argue that FEMA does permit fill if certain considerations are made. I think Mohammed made an excellent presentation to set the stage, and you've heard about all the structures this evening that they are certified as breakaway. And how I want to make my presentation is sort of the link between the house and the fill and the structures, and hopefully I can shed some light on that. The proposed fill, Chapter 62 of the Village Code clearly permits fill greater than 2 feet in depth as long as it's done under the conditions of a building permit. The project has a valid building permit. The proposed fill is not for structural support and therefore is permitted under Section R324.3 of the New York State Residential Building Code, as well as the Village Code. So it's permitted. It's not structural fill. The FEMA construction manuals and guidelines do recommend that some consideration be made if you're going to add more than 2 feet of fill. And for this project, as Nat described, this isn't a prescriptive project, this is a fully engineered project, and so there has been consideration for these things. Fill can be assumed to be either an obstruction of flow or to cause run-up or refraction or reflection, I think as Mohammed described it. So what I'd like to talk about now is go through some of the sections that the architect put together and describe to you and illustrate to you where the gaps are and how water flows through the house.
Draw a hole in for you.
Actually, I'm okay. Yeah, I'm good. So, all right, so this is a south elevation. I think you're familiar with it from Mohammed's presentation. The only thing I want to point out here is that this line here is the flood line. And so this slight hatched area here is actually the structure below the flood elevation. In my estimation, about 60% of the pool is actually above BFE. A small percentage of it is, well, 40% of it is below BFE. This is the existing grade in gray. The orange, I guess that's the right color, is a concrete structure, grade beams, so forth. And these dotted lines are timber piles that support the concrete grade beams. This blue opening is basically the opening under the pool in the front of the house that's available for water to transmit through and around the swimming pool. This assumes, you'll see this dotted line here, this is the small amount of fill that was placed at the south end of the swimming pool. And again, it's all about scale. If you look at the dune here, this section is to scale. You look at the dune here relative to the house, and this green area is the amount of fill that's being proposed in front of the swimming pool. So at a 3-to-1 grade, very similar to the natural dune. It's proposed to be non-compacted, non-cohesive sand, very similar to beach-compatible sand that exists on the beach, and it's readily erosive, and I'll talk about that shortly. So I don't think any of us look at sand dunes as being reflective or diverting waves. I think Mohammed covered that quite carefully, so I won't go into that in any more detail. That's the south elevation. Okay, this is the north elevation, so this is the backside as it comes through. Okay, again, orange is foundation, blue is areas where water can transmit. Now, behind this is a breakaway wall, which is assumed to fail, which it fails both if there's sand on it or if the sand has been totally eroded. It will fail either condition once the wave action hits. The design storm wave and water elevations hit. So let's see here. It goes like, okay, this is the sidewall elevations. Okay, let's just see here. This is the east elevation. Again, same scenario. Orange is structure. Blue is a available area for water transmission. The purple is the side of the swimming pool. Again, the majority above BFE, and this is the sand fill.
Turn those around, please.
No. Just,
Okay.
these you can look at them if you want.
These here. Okay, sure. Okay, we talked about the fill material as being beach sand-like and uncompacted and readily erodible. We talked about the south-facing sand dune. Okay, Mohammed talked about water flowing around, sort of flow vectors aren't diverted over to the neighbor's property. They have their own issues in terms of water elevation. Nat talked about this project being highly engineered and no rules of thumb being used. But there is one rule of thumb that helps us look at the potentials of scale and what would happen when water impacts the swimming pool, the small part of the swimming pool that's below the BFE. Basically, in a nutshell, they basically look at 30-foot splash zones in any direction of a particular structure. So it's clear that this house is more than 30 feet from the neighboring structures. And in fact, the pool is more than 30 feet from our proposed house. So because of that and because of the scale of the property, we're predicting a negligible impact from both any wave effects on this particular house or any fill that's used on the particular property before it erodes away. I want to point out that FEMA does not prohibit retaining walls, landscape retaining walls. They are permitted so long as they are considered in the design. I think Nat covered the issues with the swimming pool very carefully, so I won't touch on those. In my submission earlier, you'll see that we demonstrate mathematically that the soil that's proposed, both the sand that's proposed to be used between the landscape walls as well as the south face of the swimming pool, is erodible under the design waves. It's expected to be totally washed away during the storm. And we also looked at the proposed gravel driveway. The gravel in the driveway is also highly erodible. There's calculations in our report. In closing, because there's been an awful lot presented tonight, at the last hearing, there's a couple things I just wanted to clarify. I believe the opposition stated that the soil on the landscape walls was 130 pounds per cubic foot. That's the weight of soil. That's not the lateral load of soil. Two different things. You'll see in the Silman calculations, they actually convert the weight of soil to what the actual lateral load is. Two different things. Very important for the board to understand that. And I also wanted to point out that in the December 17th letter of Mr. Guardino, there's a discussion about venting and flood venting and openings for the foundation. All that actually pertains to a different flood zone, pertains to the AE flood zone. As you know, we're in the velocity flood zone, so that whole discussion is really not pertinent to this project. And then finally, there was some discussion about water upwelling underneath the house, and that area, the void that's under the house, would fill, and you'd have an equalized water pressure between outside and inside. Very difficult scenario to understand, but if it were to occur and water was to bubble up, you have to understand that there's a lag time. So waves coming in happen immediately. Water that would bubble up under the house would have to travel through ground, which slows down. It's has a much slower velocity than wave action, and then it would also have to come up to basically there's a slab 4 there. So the likelihood that a significant amount of water would build up in the void under the house before the flooding occurs on the outside is very unlikely, just because of the lag time effect. It takes a long time for water to transmit underground and come up to the floor relative to the waves washing in, which is basically much faster. So, are there any questions or?
Mr. Bennett, can I just ask you then,
Sure.
in your opinion, that the importation of this sand, which is essentially the same material that it would appear as the dune, is not going to be an impediment to, in a flood event to the water being able to flow underneath the building?
No, we've looked at the design velocities of the floodwaters and the grain sizes of the material that we're proposing, and have demonstrated in our report that it is easily eroded away at the design storms. So we would expect it to be washed away and allow the walls to break away. But I also point out that the walls will break away one way or the other. They're designed that way, whether there's sand on them or not sand on them. Once the waves fill that, they're designed to break away, and Nat has stated that. So.
And this is the way the building department has been allowing it and permitting it for 30 years. You cannot find a house in the village of Southampton, including the Dean House and the Hackett House, that don't have fill right up to the first floor. Indeed, I have to question whether or not, since the Hackett and Dean houses were built in the AE zone now, they're in the VE zone now, and by the way, during this model flood event, if the storm waters are at 16 feet, Dean has about 4 or 5 feet in his first floor. So I think what's deflecting off these walls before they break away is even to a layman not even a factor. But indeed, if they were built during the when the A zone rules were applicable, they in turn had to be the basements had to be hydrostatically equalized, which is a fancy way for saying that there have to be holes in the basement. I ask you to look at the as-built for the Dean and the Hackett House. You can drive by those homes yourself. There's tiered retaining walls. They brought in about 9 feet of fill. Query whether or not the hydrostatic equalization, which is supposed to be happening in those in that Hackett and Dean house, is indeed effective at all because of the fill that's in there. So again, we have another grand round of hypocrisy, just like we saw with the Dean and Hackett saying that they can measure from base floodplain elevation +2, but 40 Meadow can't. We see the same type of hypocrisy in which they can bring as much fill as they want, don't have to worry about what that fill will do to the surrounding properties, but somehow we're held to a standard that is different than every single house from Meadow Lane to Gin Lane, all the way down to the Murray McDonald compound, all the way down to Fowler Street. These issues have never been raised before, and the reason they've never been raised before is because the engineering has been there to support the construction of these houses in that fashion, and the building department, which is constantly monitored by the Federal Emergency Agency, well, actually for the state administers the FEMA regulations. Mr. Foster will tell you that he's visited at least every year by the FEMA people. They've never had a problem with this. So this is a figment of someone's imagination. This is a sophisticated house that's been engineered by state-of-the-art engineering, and this attempt to stop this house, we hope we will shut it down.
John, do you have another copy of the report?
I gave Mr. Bordino a copy of the report.
Yes, but the Southampton Association gave you
I'll
a
send
copy
you one
of
in
their
the mail.
report.
I'll send you one in the mail.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Anthony Guardino, law firm of Farrell Fritz, Hauppauge, New York. I will be very, very brief. We heard tonight a lot of what I view as some post hoc justifications for the actions of the building department. However, as you know, the subject of this appeal is whether or not the actions of the building inspector when he issued that building permit back in September were proper or not, and whether or not the plans complied with FEMA or violated FEMA and the village code. Basically, the determination is made based on the evidence that he had at the time he made that decision, not based on evidence that may have been submitted in October, November, December, as late as January. It's what did he have? Did he have the ability to determine whether this house complied with FEMA or not? I submit that he did not. I point out two things. One is that the building plans that were stamped, approved by him, do not show the retaining walls that we've heard so much about tonight as being breakaway walls. Those plans did not show those walls as being breakaway walls. Those plans are shown as breakaway walls now after our engineers have brought to light the defect in the plans. This is not a moving target. This is not something that evolves and you get to keep submitting plans. What happened back on September 26th when the building inspector issued his determination? And I submit that those plans did not show that they were breakaway walls. The other item that I would point out is that tonight we're hearing a lot about the so-called breakaway walls. Well, they're sort of breakaway walls. They can hold up the soil, but they break away under the force of water. That may be the case. I don't know. Our engineers are going to look at that. However, I do point out that those calculations that were submitted are submitted tonight, January of 2015, 5 months after the building inspector issued his report, or issued his building permit. They didn't have those calculations. We've been looking for those calculations because, as was pointed out tonight, yes, FEMA talks about a safe harbor. If you do it this way, you don't have a problem. I heard tonight, but there are other ways to do it if you engineer it properly and justify it. I submit to you, when you look at that record that the building inspector was supposed to submit to this board, you will not find those justifications in that report anywhere or anywhere in that file. Those justifications and calculations were only provided to you tonight, and I submit that the building inspector has never seen those numbers that you have seen tonight. And then I would just like to point out that, we have, this is the third public hearing. The last meeting we had, I guess, November, December, now we're in January. We made a request at the end of the last meeting that the board close the public hearing and then get to the point where they can make where you can make your decision. You can deliberate and make a decision. I'd like to reiterate that request with the one caveat that we be able, my engineers and experts be able to rebut in writing what was just introduced tonight. I was not given the courtesy, not 1 minute of courtesy. I was given this as I walked in the door tonight. So we would want an opportunity, but we just would like an opportunity to respond in writing. My concern is that this will drag on forever, because every time we come, if the board adjourns this for another week, we'll end up with another booklet next week, and this hearing and this proceeding will never end. And I submit that we need to move forward with this. I think 3 public hearings is plenty of time, and I respectfully submit that the board close the public hearing tonight with that one caveat that we'll be allowed to respond in writing to rebut. I thank you, and I do understand, though, there is, I think, some members of the public that do want to speak, but that's the conclusion of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Rick, anybody?
Well, let's see what anybody else has to say first.
Is there anyone out in the audience who'd like to be heard?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Jay Deasing, and I represent the Southampton Association. We're very pleased this evening to have Len Jackson here. Obviously, a lot of new additional information has been presented. We were not privy to that information. It wasn't available to us before this evening. But I would like Mr. Jackson to, if he would like to at least give us a little bit of information about his professional background, and then also make a few comments from the brief information that he's been able to review. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Leonard Jackson. I am a principal of Leonard Jackson Associates. I'm a professional engineer. I've been so for 50 years. For about 30 years, I've been a consultant through the Federal Emergency Management Agency, preparing flood studies, flood mapping. I did prepare the flood maps that are this topic of this structure tonight. I prepared the flood maps for all of Suffolk County, Nassau County, New York City, Westchester County, Rockland County, and so forth. I've heard a lot of interesting discussion from the experts that were brought forward. And let me just say that my report, which was introduced to your board, I believe, at your last meeting, indicating that this project was in violation of FEMA requirements, primarily because the proposal obstructs the flow of the waves, which is required in the V16 zone. You cannot obstruct the flow of the waves. The object of breakaway walls, by the way, is to allow the waves to flow right through and under the house and pass unobstructed to the other side of the house and across the road without affecting the dwellings, the construction of the structure itself or the neighboring structures. So all this discussion about breakaway walls and will they break away and will not break away, you must keep in mind that the purpose of the breakaway is to prevent an obstruction of flow. The object is to let the walls break away, fall down, and the flow goes through and under the dwelling and passes through. It doesn't affect the adjacent properties. We've heard testimony that the walls will break away because they'll hold up the soil, and when the wave comes in, it gets under the house, the walls will fall down. Well, that's great. But the object is to prevent an obstruction. The obstruction then is not the breakaway walls, even if they do fall down. The obstruction is the soil that's outside of the walls. So there really is no need for breakaway walls if you bring in the soil. So all this discussion about why are the walls going to break away, who cares? If you bring in an obstruction, the object of the breakaway walls is negated anyway. So you might as well make them solid walls. It doesn't really matter. The key is you've created an obstruction to flow. Now, one of the experts testified that, well, an obstruction to flow is okay because it's not going to affect the neighboring structures because they're higher. Well, the fact is, during this 100-year event, or the 1% chance of occurrence in any year event, we don't really know what the adjacent land is going to be because that could be eroded as well as the land on which we're talking about. So the testimony that the adjacent structures will be unaffected is based upon the condition of the adjacent structures being what they are today, and it's not the condition that will occur during this 100-year event. So all of the discussion that we've heard tonight about the breakaway walls really will break away is academic. The obstruction that's brought in is the soil that's brought in, and that soil is maybe 10 feet high in the front of the building. On the sides of the building, I don't know how high it is. It could be 10 or more feet. The structures on the side of the building, those retaining walls, which are planters, those also are obstructions. And the whole point about this particular structure is that it's designed, even though it's supposed to be breakaway, it's really an obstruction to flow, and as well as the swimming pool. The swimming pool doesn't have to break free and damage some other structure. The swimming pool itself is an obstruction to the wave flow. And once you obstruct the wave flow, that wave flow can affect the adjacent buildings and structures and lands, which themselves may have been eroded. So what we've heard tonight is that, I think the testimony is that it's okay to put obstructions on this site. It's okay to put obstructions because the neighbors are going to be okay because they're higher. I think that kind of boils it down. But the fact is, that's not the case. We don't know what the condition of the neighboring structures are going to be. And that's why FEMA says very clearly in their regulations, unobstructed flow is a requirement. Another thing they say, by the way, we've heard someone said about the vents in the basement and so forth and so on. Well, that really is academic. Basements are not permitted in the V zone. The law clearly states no enclosed building space below the base flood elevation. That means there cannot be a basement below elevation 16. Well, this building proposes that very thing, a basement below elevation 16, surrounded by land, or fill, that's brought in up to elevation 15 or 16. This entire project happens to be a violation of FEMA regulations, and the testimony that you've heard that it's compliance is incorrect. Now, the fact that somebody else somewhere in another town, in another village, did something similar to this, it really has no bearing on the facts. The facts is that this structure is a violation. The walls, whether breakaway or not, may be immaterial because the soil that's brought in is the obstruction itself. The swimming pool itself is also an obstruction. So even though I haven't gone into detail, and I would like to read the report, and I would like to respond to it, from what I've heard tonight, is that in this particular instance, the experts are suggesting that it's okay to obstruct the wave flow in a V zone, and they're obstructing it in a manner that's perfectly clear. I don't think the experts have said they're not obstructing the flow. I think they've said that it's okay to obstruct the flow because the dwellings on the adjacent sides are higher and they won't be damaged. Well, that's not the case. The case is that we don't know the conditions during this 1% chance of a current storm, and that's why FEMA says you can't obstruct the flow. I'll be glad to submit a written report also if that's acceptable.
Do the houses on either side, do they have these breakaway walls?
Pardon?
Do the houses on either side, the Dean house and the Hackett house, do they have these breakaway walls?
I don't know.
Well, that's not an answer to the question.
That's
not an answer. Somebody said that they're in the AE zone. That's not an answer to the question because they're in a VE zone.
They don't have to have breakaway walls?
No, when they were constructed, they were in an AE zone.
And they didn't need
now
them.
in the same zone that this house is in. If they had to be rebuilt, they would have to be rebuilt pursuant
With
to
breakaway
AE
walls.
When I prepared the new, I think it was 2009, if I'm not mistaken, and frankly, I don't recall what the zone was before I prepared the new zone maps. But clearly, the new zone maps put those houses in the V16 zone. And by the way, they're not on the periphery of the V16 zone. They're dead in the middle of the V16 zone, and if you go further inland, they're still the V zone. So this is not an instance where the dwelling that's proposed is just on the periphery and perhaps some way you could perhaps redefine the V zone based on analyses. That can't happen here, I don't believe, because the V zone extends further inland. Any questions? I'll be glad to answer them.
I'd like to comment that there was no testimony whatsoever that there wouldn't be any impact because the properties on either side were higher. I didn't hear that once. I know that's a figment of Mr. Jackson's imagination. No one testified, not one of our experts testified that there'd be no damage to the properties on the adjacent side because they were higher.
Well, that I misinterpret that, but then if they will be damaged, that's the exact intent of the law, is to prevent that damage.
Is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to be heard? Did you have anything else, Chick?
I don't.
Rick, what do we do with this? You want to close it for decision pending their written response?
I don't know how we close it I mean, we've done things before where we closed something for decision and allowed people to submit a legal memorandum or something, but it sounds to me like they want to submit evidence, more expert evidence. I don't know how we can close a record and take in evidence from either side after we close it.
I can comment. I'm not looking to introduce any new evidence.
Can you go up to a microphone, please?
Yes,
I can't
sorry.
record that.
My only request, respectfully, is just to have the ability to rebut what's in this, because I only saw it.
Well, we don't have any problem giving you time to rebut, but
Well, my concern is that after I have a chance to rebut, that we come back at the next hearing in February, and then I get handed another book. That's my concern.
You might
I'm
very
just trying
well
to.
be.
Well, see, there you go.
That's the last word. No, absolutely.
No, but
The point is, we have to close this at some point, right?
Yeah, that's my
At some
point.
point, we
Right,
have to
right.
close
With
it.
the appellant, we should get the last word, as, that's typical.
No, what, is it really? I wasn't aware of that.
Ma'am, please.
they're looking, the appellant's attorney is looking for an opportunity to present written evidence.
You know,
I don't have
at
any
some
problem.
point, we have to close this.
I don't have any problem with
We
them
can't
doing
carry
that.
this on until next summer.
But I don't know how we can close the record.
And when is that testimony going to be presented? And am I going to be presented with
Well, if
expert
he gets it in
testimony?
before the work session, and he can get you some copies too.
That's fine.
Well, in this case, our work session is 2 nights before the hearing.
That doesn't make any sense.
Can you guys work out any kind of an agreement on a time
All
frame?
depends upon the time.
As long as we have a definitive date that it closes, I'm okay with that.
You can't do that. How can you have a
Wait, wait,
definitive date that anything closes? Depends upon what comes in.
We don't know what you're going to submit. What if we have questions on what you submit?
So then the hearing's never going to end.
Okay.
The hearing's never going to be closed.
That's what it looks
Stop
like.
putting in
That's what it
evidence.
looks like.
We're gonna be here next summer.
Putting in evidence. You started the application. Stop.
John, don't, let him speak, will you? Anyway,
I
well,
think we should adjourn it for all purposes. I think we should encourage both attorneys to work out a time frame so that at the next meeting, we'll be able to close the record.
And can they get the information to Chick too, so he can, we really haven't gotten any advice from him.
Well, we're not,
You
I
know,
mean, that's the other thing that I've said right from the start. Once all the, what I call evidence, expert opinions, stuff like that, I don't mean to put lawyers in a different category, but I don't consider you guys to be
I understand.
experts on the evidence that we're talking
No,
about.
of course
So
not.
I know you're not taking that the wrong
I
way.
agree. I think it, we agree.
Listen, my
As I've said before, once we have all the expert evidence in, we're not piecemeal reviewing everything. Because then, so once we have all the evidence in, we're gonna need to look at it. We may need to ask our own consultant for comments on that. As far as we're concerned, we can close the record and get any comments that we might want after we've looked at it from him, without, opening the record, but I don't know what you guys want to do about that.
But see, that's the thing. I have no objection to what you're saying, except for the fact that you're saying when all the evidence is submitted. And if that's going to be beyond my control, if Mr. Bennett submits something every night of the next, when we have another hearing, I'm okay with working on a schedule. I would like the board to maybe provide some oversight over that, and then we could work it out. I'm happy to do
It
that.
depends upon what he puts in, number one. Number two, if Mr. Voorhees is going to comment, or his organization is going to comment, it would be taking away my due process if I don't have the opportunity to comment on that. That's the way it is. I'm
at some
sorry.
point, we have to close this.
I understand
As
that.
far as I'm concerned, I would like to close it tonight, but evidently, we're not gonna be able
You
to.
know what? I would be fine with that.
Because we've heard back and forth, back and forth, back
Well,
and
what
forth.
about it, Mr. Bordino? Let's close the hearing tonight. How do you feel about that?
No,
The other one is in a rush. Oh, now with the shoes on. a
Well, he
different
wants,
foot.
he has a right to respond to what you submitted tonight.
Come on, this was calculated, John.
Wasn't
This was calculated to hand this to me when I
calculated.
walked in the door.
A month ago,
Come
you
on.
came
Can we set a time frame
Yes, let's do that.
that you will submit your
Fine.
evidentiary response by a certain date and get it to Mr. Bennett? And then, I mean, we don't know what's going to be in there. But if you get it to him by a certain date, then he'll have enough time to, if there is any response, and we don't want repetitive stuff.
Understood. 10 days is
From
fine.
either side.
I would like to keep it short. 10 days is fine.
Okay,
All
so,
right, in regard to the work session, it should be the 17th. But that's the week that the building department is moving from Hill Street back into this building. So we can't have it the 17th, so we're going to have the work session the 24th.
what's
2 days
today?
before the-
January 22, you're looking for 10 days?
Just 10 days is all I need.
All right, so that would be the 1st of February,
Yes.
2nd of February, it's a Monday.
Yeah, and how about Mr. Bennett now? Well, wait a second. No.
No.
Wait a second.
Let's do this. 10 days for the appellant's submission, and all that's going to include, I mean, I don't know, Mr. Jackson, I think, is here for the Southampton Association. I guess that would include him also, so I don't mean to leave you out when I say appellant. 10 days for appellants and Mr. Jackson's submission. 10 days thereafter for Mr. Bennett's submission. That takes us up until, when, what's 20 days from now?
Takes us up to about the 12th of February.
When is the building department closing? Because you won't be able to file anything while they're
Closing the
closed.
week of the 17th to move. I don't know how many days it's going to take them, but they're going to be moving that
So
week.
that's going to be before then. So 10 days, 10 days.
Fine.
And then
Brings
with
you up to
the
about
idea,
Valentine's Day, which is very appropriate.
with the idea that we will then close the record.
It's a love affair, right?
With the idea that we will then close the record at the next hearing.
That's fair. Thank you.
It's going to require a little good faith, but
That's
we
fine.
got to try to be fair
That's
to
fine.
everybody.
Is it going to Mr. Voorhees, to Nelson Pope for review then?
We'll have to decide that when we get to that point.
Fair enough.
All right?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Therefore, we're going to adjourn this for all purposes. Or are we going to close the
Going to
decision?
adjourn it for all purposes with the guidelines that we alluded to.
You have a motion?
I move that we adjourn for all purposes.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Kevin, I'm gonna get a glass of water. I'll be right back.
Okay. On the application of case number 2852, Michael Ianu, 76 Pine Street.
I have no experts.
Hi, John.
Just me. Should I?
Yeah, he said the thing is on.
It's on.
Oh, okay. I think the only issue here in terms of what the board wanted to see was after the last meeting, we wanted to see a revised survey because the surveys were sort of a little bit messy. You wanted to see an existing condition survey and a proposed condition survey. I think that was the only request, but just quickly going over the application. Really, mostly, even though we need variance relief, we're staying within the pre-existing non-conforming setbacks, 24.5 front yard setback to Pine Street. Currently, there's a 24.4 setback, but we just want to enlarge that roof porch. Again, we have a 30-foot setback only because of the zone we're in. If it was just the square footage of the property, wouldn't be an issue. A pre-existing non-conforming, we wanted a 25-foot setback to Burnett Road. Currently, the setback is 22.4 feet, so although it doesn't meet the 30-foot, it decreases the degree of non-conformity. There's a little, I would hardly call it a pool, it's a little 9 by 6 by 10 pool between the proposed, between the house and the existing garage. And we're very, very shy from meeting the 40-foot requirement. We meet 20 feet on all the other sides for noise attenuation. We're actually 34.7 feet from Burnett Street, but it's behind the house. So although it's just a tad shy of the setback, we're behind the house. And then finally, we need about a 23 square foot variance for one of those parking spaces. I think hopefully you'll agree that that the house there is now a sort of nondescript, pretty run down, and although from a great Southampton family, but the new owner is proposing something, and I really think it's going to help pick up that corner, which is a fairly prominent corner right near the school. So we hope that although there are a bunch of variances there, cumulatively, they're all pretty small. And again, hopefully the submission of the as-built survey clarifies some of those issues. The survey was getting a little messy with both the existing conditions and the proposed on it, so. That's all I really
Fairly
have.
small lot, right?
Yeah.
They're tiny over there.
Yeah. I really don't, it's one of those applications, you either think it's reasonable or you don't. I think it's fairly reasonable. I don't think there was any, I hope I'm not wrong, but I don't think there was any neighborhood concern, but I could be wrong.
I haven't seen any.
No, we did check the file, there's nothing in the file. So again, we think nice improvement to the area.
You have any questions, anybody? Rick,
Pardon?
you have any questions on this one?
No.
Anybody out in the audience have any questions? No.
Close it for decision.
Thank you.
I move we close for decision. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We'll have a decision next month.
Good.
That's good. There's a lot of stuff.
Gotta get rid of a pile there.
On the application of case number 2853, JV 20 Gin Lane, LLC, 20 Gin Lane.
Do you want me to get your consultant? You want me to get checked? No, I don't.
Oh, shit, yeah.
Good evening, Melissa Dedovich, Peconic Environmental Associates. I'm here with Kevin McGowan from Pepper and Angel. As you may recall, at the last meeting, of which we were the last, Mr. DePietris was kind enough to provide us an email review from Mr. Voorhees. We weren't able to get a memo, but subsequent to that, our office was able to meet with Chick and go over the recommendations that he gave us. The results of which we now have, we submitted to the board about 2 days ago, a revised landscape plan and a revised drainage plan, as well as a revised survey, which is in front of you. At number one, we have now no non-native landscaping proposed within the 125-foot wetland setback. There is a segment of existing mature privet where the proposed driveway is going to be. That's going to be relocated. That's the only thing that's there. Nothing new is going to be placed in there. The proposed motor core has been reduced and is actually no longer located within your 25-foot wetlands jurisdiction, so that's out of the picture. The reduction in the size of the motor core has also resulted in a net decrease of 173 cubic yards of fill within the 125-foot setback. So now we're from 860 cubic yards down to 687 cubic yards of fill. And the drainage plan, which I know Mr. Guzowitz had a question about. Here it is. Actually, this is not it. Oh, the drainage plan, of which you have a copy of, shows that all of the dry wells have been removed from the 125-foot wetland setback with the exception of a 10-foot by 10-foot dry well, which has to be located in that section to address the driveway runoff. There's a channel drain at the base of the driveway, and unfortunately, as you can see on the cross-section on the drainage plan, we cannot, with the invert necessary, we cannot relocate that dry well to outside the 125-foot setback. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer any of them.
There's a letter in opposition to this from William Manger Jr. He's concerned about the amount of fill on the wetlands and drainage onto Gin Lane and possibly into Lake Agawam.
And I believe that all of our revisions have addressed that.
And he's concerned with the location of the motor court.
The motor court is now outside of your jurisdiction.
Now outside. Okay, so that's good. That will be entered in the file.
Okay.
you have anything, Chick?
Just, first of all, what Melissa indicated to the board is accurate from my perspective. We did provide an email that was handed out at the last hearing. I was not able to attend. We did discuss it, and the plan has come in, and it's responsive to the comments that I had at that time. This is a property that's across the road from Lake Agawam, but because, you know, we have lateral extent jurisdiction, there is areas of this property that are affected by that setback. So the driveway passes through the landscape setback area. It's all native plantings within the 125 feet, and they've moved the motor court, which is excellent. My only question is, I don't see a revision date on the plan. And I see to be determined. And
January
that's-
15th, right down here.
Okay, so that's the date.
Correct.
So the plans were redated.
Because the motor core had to be changed and everything too, so the plans are redated.
So all of the plans that we're referring to now are January 15th.
With the exception of the survey, which I believe is, just to make sure, January 20th.
Okay.
The drainage and the planting plans are both.
All right, so I'll make sure we have that.
You have the whole set?
I do.
Because if you don't, I can give you my copy.
I just wanted to clarify the date.
Oh, okay.
And that was all I had.
Is there anyone out in the audience who'd like to heard of this application?
Proposed for decision?
I move it for decision.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
New cases.
Yeah.
That brings us down to the new cases. First one being 2854 Robert M. Robert, 159 Main Street.
Good evening, Michael Barringer, architect for the applicant. I don't know if you're familiar with this project, but we are in the process of gaining approvals to expand and renovate the residential property that is a historic white family residence at 159 Main Street. Very briefly, portions of the house, I believe, date back to 1800, and the rear portion of the house, which is actually known as the Jagger Addition, was probably the original structure, and the Greek Revival farmhouse combination structure in the front was built as an addition to that. The property is owned by the Colonial Society in the village of Southampton, and they have requested it remain as a residential parcel and not go into the village business of which the property is zoned. My client is going to propose to maintain it as a residence, obviously. We would like to expand the home, not only the footprint of the home, but we would be reducing some of the footage within the house that is non-conforming, and the net increase of the property, I believe, was about 500 square feet, which is well below the 50% that we can request as a variance. The building department determined that 3 variances were needed on this, one to expand a nonconformity, and the other 2 had to do with the commercial aspect of the property not having had less width on the 2 street fronts than commercial property is required, so they're more technical variances than requests for more.
It's the span, right?
Yes. I can keep my comments brief and see if you have any questions on this, or I could go on, but I'll see if you have any questions.
I don't really, it's a large piece of property, good-sized piece of property. It's always been a house.
It needs a lot of work, actually, but the frame and some of the foundations, the chimneys we're going to maintain, and we've been in front of the ARB. They're processing our application, and also the Historical Society has 7 years after the sale of the property to monitor how it's maintained and developed. So there's going to be, from the historic point of view, a lot of eyes and ears on this project as it goes forth. And you know, I think with this being the 375th anniversary of the village, the fact that this project is going to be a centerpiece in the Village of Restoration is a positive thing. And the additions that we're proposing will not be visible, really. If the best view of this house is sort of catty-corner, almost from the post house, we're adding to the north and the south of that, so that view of the house is going to be preserved. And I think that is significant to the overall development of the property.
Do you have any questions? Rick?
Just a comment, the span variances that are being advertised and asked for, they do relate to the new regulations in the VB district, which are designed for commercial development with, basically like Main Street, et cetera, with side-by-side buildings, et cetera. So since this is a one-family dwelling project, I don't see that those regulations, have any real bearing on the development of this property, because it's going to be developed for residential. Just a curiosity comment. I know they're not before, it's not before the board, but I see you're proposing a new garage near Jagger Lane and a new cabana near the north line. You're utilizing setbacks that are designed for commercial development rather than residential development. But then the basis for your variance from the pan stuff is because it's residential rather than commercial. I'm just wondering, curiosity, is there any reason why the proposed garage is proposed to be located so close to Jagger Lane and the proposed cabana so close to the north line?
Well, the property is surrounded by pavement, basically. We have the parking lot from Wallbaum's, which extends to the south end, to the west, where the sports rehab facility is. And there are some concerns about the value of being able to take on this project, and it has to.
I was more concerned about the. My comment actually more relates to the proposed garage only being 8 feet from Jagger Lane.
Well, I guess in terms of the development of the property, we're limiting the intrusion of the automobile onto this property. We're utilizing the existing curb cut, and I think there was an effort on our part to not have a parking court in the middle of the property. So I understand your point about the two aspects of the zoning, but I believe it's in keeping with the massing of the structures in the vicinity of that garage and their distance to the property line. So I don't think it would be an intrusion into the streetscape or the feeling of the street, with the Catina's building being almost on the property line, I believe.
Those other two buildings, they
Pardon?
exist already. Those other two buildings, they exist already. The proposed cabana, that's there. It's just going to be changed into something else.
There's an existing garage-like structure there that is going to be maintained. There's another structure in the corner that is there's a dilapidated chicken coop and another flat roof structure that is in poor shape that are being removed, and we're actually building the garage from new and what we're calling the cabana as new. And there's a structure that can be converted somewhat to a potting shed or some other type of a outbuilding that is remaining on the property.
The one that's, you call it frame garage,
Yes.
will not be a frame garage, it'll be a storage shed, potting shed.
It is a
gardening.
garage per se. You could drive a car over the lawn and park in it, I suppose, but we're not intending it as, we're not extending a garage to that structure, a driveway, I'm sorry.
And the proposed cabana is gonna be a completely new building, right?
That's correct, yes.
So you could give it a little bit more setback on that, from that property line that faces a parking lot, at least enough for screening.
We have submitted a landscaping plan. I don't know if that is something you've been able to review, but we want the screening for our property as much as anyone would want it on the other side of the property line. I think that's one of the difficulties here is because of the night lighting for the parking lots and the village location here is that we're proposing heavy screening as well.
But you have like 2 feet from the back corner of that cabana, which doesn't seem like there's very much room for screening.
In other words, he's saying
In
could that
that one
cabana
corner.
be moved a little bit to the south?
I think it could be, yes.
And the frame garage, that's already exists.
That exists.
But the cabana people are gonna use, and, the garage probably screens the back of the cabana
I mean,
to
if
some
we-
degree anyway, so. It's just that northerly rear yard of the cabana could have a little more space in there.
I mean, what would you suggest there? Just make it to 6 feet, say?
Yeah.
I believe we could do that. If we could do that as a submission of a survey to show that setback would be, I don't know what
Be 6 rather than 2.
we could move that structure 4 feet.
Excuse me, hi.
This is Gary.
I'm Gary Hartman, co-designer, builder. What's behind this cabana?
There's a driveway.
There's a graveyard over here, and there's a parking lot here, and there's a commercial facility here. This is what we're talking about, right? And as you pointed out, the existing garage that we would be rebuilding, and it would become a studio of some sort, is already, I believe it is 3 feet off that property line.
Yeah.
So it just seemed that this cabana being, okay, if we put it to 3 feet off the property line, we could put some arborvitaes right across there. I mean, that would leave enough space.
Are you gonna are you gonna rebuild the frame structure from scratch, or are you gonna renovate the building that's there?
The existing building?
Yeah.
The existing building has some really nice beams inside that are in really good shape, so we're proposing, but on one side of it, on the east side of it, it has been rebuilt with some conventional fir framing. We would remove that, and we would use parts from the other building that we're removing to rebuild that, to keep it all so it's a nice timber-framed interior, and it would become like a studio for the owner of whatever, a potting shed or studio. So that's what we would be re-siding it and things like that. So it was important to us because of the overall size of the patios and everything. And I know that there's a lot of property here to work with, but the proportion and of everything the way it is, it was kind of important for us to move the building back that far. So I understand your point about trying to get some space there, but could we go to, like, say, the same distance as the existing garage with that?
Maybe 3 feet?
Yes, if that would be okay.
Not gonna be any screening then, right? But then again, 3 feet's tight,
It's enough space to put some nice
You could get a
arborvitae.
hedge in there.
I believe there's stockade fencing.
Well, there is actually a stockade
Yeah.
fence.
There's stockade fencing on the parking lot side right now.
It doesn't bother me because you know what's behind there. There's no house there. There's no
No, I know.
nothing. There's a driveway that comes off of Main Street that goes into into Wall Bombs.
Exactly. It's
With the
all
therapy
commercial
place on the other side of the driveway.
Yeah, it's all commercial space
Yeah.
back there, well, of course, plus the graveyard, so.
So can you do
But, I
3
mean,
feet?
somebody's gonna be using it as a residence, so that's, they're gonna have to put up with that parking lot. That's why I thought maybe they'd want a little more screening there,
The building will provide some screening
The back of the building.
to the
Yes.
property within itself. And, you know, the biggest challenge is more towards the south, where the lights from Walbaum parking lot are not what you would put in today. You know, they're not the dark skies.
Right.
They're big sodium lights that intrude on this property. So we're sharing the same goal in terms of the privacy here.
It's fine with me.
Yeah, 2.9, the same as the garage. And, yeah.
Thank you.
It'd be enough room for edge.
Yeah,
off
get the
and on.
2.9 or 3 feet. You have anything else, Rick?
Pardon?
Do you have anything else?
No.
Anybody out in the audience wish to be heard?
I am Eric Woodward. I'm a trustee of the Southampton Historical Museum, and I'm here to say that as a organization, we're quite happy with this proposal. We were willed this property with no restrictions and considered carefully, somewhat as stewards of the history of Southampton, how to handle it. We devised a set of about 10 easement restrictions to encourage encourage the preservation of the property in certain aspects. I do want to correct one item. The easements don't actually restrict its use to residential. We left it open, expecting that we would probably have to live with a business use, since it is village business property. So in fact that we've got a buyer now who is going to be using it residentially and is interested in restoring it as a residence was a considerable, we were very happy with that. And so we would hope that you can also consider in your decision making that there was a great likelihood that this might have been developed intensively as a village business site, and instead perhaps the applicant can make use of these somewhat unusual setbacks that village business have in a residential use, and give him some slack on that. So, and I could answer any other questions you have on the history of the property or the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
I have a question, Rick. If they go and renovate this into a residence, and then 3 years from now decide that they want a boutique in there, can they just go back to it being a boutique and or a group of different shops in these different buildings, it's
Well, they'd have to meet, I mean, if some future owner wanted to convert this to a permitted use, they would be allowed to do that, provided, but they'd have to comply with, requirements applicable to the commercial use, including off-street parking, site plan approval, architecture review board approval, any restrictions that might be imposed by the architectural review board, either on approving this or on or in connection with a future application. So the answer is yes, but they would have to be sensitive. They'd have to comply with everything.
So we close this
From
one
a
for
straight
decision?
point of view of what they're asking for the house, it's a nominal variance from your point of view, so maybe we could just leave the other stuff up to the other people, other boards.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think we should write something up, because this is the first time that we're going to be granting a variance from some of these new VB district regulations. We want to make it clear that this is not a precedent, because this is residential development. And I don't want to try to word
close it for
something.
decision.
Yes, we'll close it for decision.
I move it close for decision?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And would that be with the site plan that we submitted, and that is
Just get
subject to
that, get the one cabana out to 2.9 or 3 feet.
Is that what you were stating, Mr. Peters?
Well, that, I think we can leave that to the other boards, unless you feel strongly about it.
It's fine with me, no,
Yeah.
it's all right.
Okay.
Keep it the way it is.
Stands then,
Yeah,
as submitted.
as submitted.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
On the application of 2855, 200 Captain's Neck Lane LLC, 200 Captain's Neck Lane.
Good evening, for the applicant Gilbert G. Flanagan, 21 South Main Street, Southampton. There's an affidavit of posting and an affidavit of mailing. The presentation will be fairly brief. One thing I will mention is that the plan for the proposed tennis house has been changed very slightly, although the setbacks that were applied for haven't changed. It's just the shape and design of the tennis house has been changed very slightly. And I have some plans which I can give up to you, including a slightly revised site plan and a floor plan and elevation of the proposed tennis house, which is part of the application. These were both prepared by Peter Canoyer Architects and both revised January 20. I have multiple copies of those which I can hand out. As I say, as I mentioned to you, the change is infinitesimal, and it should not. I don't think you'll find anything startling
It's
about
not
it.
on this, on the plan. This is this plan here, it shows a tennis house
So everybody can have one.
over there.
Oh, on the other, okay.
There's this little tennis house. This was, no, that's the old.
This is the old one,
as-built,
yeah, as of- yeah.
More?
Yeah, just so everybody, does everybody have, will everybody have? There are two sheets.
Each?
Yeah, there are two sheets that should go with each. It's a two-sheet package. There's a Z-
100 and 101.
Yeah, the Z100 and the Z101.
You can need to stamp these
Yeah,
in,
I
right?
need to stamp, then I thought they were all the same.
No.
No, they're.
Z100 and the stamp 101?
I've got, yeah, no, they're fine. You got them.
I got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, do I have them?
As I say, the
These are
change is
yours.
so minor that it won't really change my presentation, nor will I hope it'll change your
Together.
consideration of the application.
I'm wondering, should I?
No, you already stamped them.
I got
You've already done it.
All right.
Here's another copy.
They say the only change from what was filed with the application has to do with the footprint of the proposed tennis house, although it observes the same setbacks and the same amount of relief is being requested. Was there enough? Did Rick get one?
Did you get one, Rick?
I got a Z100, I don't have a,
Z101?
Z101, you should.
well, unless they're both, unless it's behind it.
No, he's got it right there.
Okay.
You got it?
So this is a somewhat unusual application in that, as you can see from the site plan, this property has 3 front yards. And as you can also note, the existing improvements, the swimming pool is already in the front yard, and we're proposing to move it to the opposite front yard so that it will be in the same front yard as the tennis court is. So in one sense, you could say we're reducing the amount of variance relief because only one of the front yards will have accessory structures in it, whereas now there are 2 front yards that have accessory structures in them. The tennis court lawfully exists by virtue of a variance, and I have a copy of the variance decision which was granted back in 1982, which is actually helpful, and I'll give you a copy of that for the record. Actually, multiple copies. The relevance of that is that when the tennis court variance was granted, one of the conditions was that the very dense screening that's located along Mary Lee Drive be maintained. Now, if you visited the property, I'm sure you've noted that that's heavily screened. You can barely see the tennis court where it is. And that's exemplified by the Google Earth picture, which was dated earlier, well, it was dated last year. But as you can see, 200 Captain's Neck Lane is on the corner, and there are dense evergreens and other screening along Mary Lee Drive. And since the proposed tennis house is going to be set back substantially further than the tennis court, I submit it'll be totally invisible.
Dr. Corman voted against it.
Dr. Coleman voted against it. God bless her. She hated tennis courts. To this day, she hates tennis courts. So there are some of those. I think we need another one. When we submitted the original site plan, and the site plan you have today, the existing house is going to be replaced, and that's going to conform in all respects, so it won't need any variances whatsoever. As you probably know, Mary Lee Drive is a fairly short drive. It was a street that was established in connection with a subdivision. It's a dead-end street, and it's probably obviously the least used of the three streets that provide frontage for this property. And practically, that yard is a rear yard. It functions as a rear yard. As where the tennis court is located. So now you would have the swimming pool, the tennis court, and the tennis house all in that one rear yard. So I don't know that I have to say too much more about this. I think it's a fairly straightforward application. We're not in the required front yard. I think that's important. If I didn't say it before, although I did say it in the application, we're in the front yard, but we meet the setback. In fact, we exceed the setback.
So what they're gonna do is tear everything down,
Yeah.
all except the tennis court.
Except for the tennis court. The tennis court is going to be rehabilitated in place without any expansion. I also have, just so that the record's complete and consistent, the architects prepared a zoning analysis to match the new site plan, which shows that's a very slight change in the size of the proposed tennis pavilion, which is 609 square feet, which is well under the 800 square feet that's allowed. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I also have Jim Taylor from the architect's office if you have any technical questions of him.
It's got 3 front yards, as you say.
Got 3 front yards.
There's not many properties that have 3 front yards. Well, there is one just up the street from this, but.
Right. And the good news sort of is that the tennis court is already in that yard. Practically, it works as a rear yard.
Well, the tennis court is right next to a tennis court on the adjacent.
That's correct.
And Mary Lee Drive, nothing goes on.
No.
Nothing goes on there. It's very quiet out there. So I would hope that this would not be offensive to anybody.
You have any questions, Rick?
Nope.
No? You want to do it, or you want to hold it, or?
I think we'll close it for decision.
I move we close.
Is there anyone out in the audience who wants to be heard to this? No. I move.
I move that we close for decision.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Jim Lane.
The application of 2856 Beck and Alex 22 LLC, 22 Gin Lane. I gather this is right next to the other one?
It's right north of it. You just took my opening line. Good evening, Melissa Dedovich, Peconic Environmental Associates. I'm here along with Kevin McGowan of Essex Harbor and Angel on behalf of Beck and Alex LLC. Yes, indeed, this property is immediately to the north of JV 20 Gin Lane LLC. It actually, if you can see on the map, it's on the curve going towards Gin Lane. Over here is Lake Agawam. I've also, to help the board out, I've actually highlighted in yellow the area that's within the jurisdiction of the board, the 125-foot jet. So I've also, in your package, you also see the updated landscape plan. Again, our office was lucky enough to be able to meet with Mr. Voorhees about this within the last month. The one comment we were asked to do was to confirm that the seeded lawn area to clarify that the seed lawn area, not just in this area, but throughout the property, as you know, it is currently a vacant property, will consist of a native fescue mix that we typically have been using and getting approval from this board on. And the grading and fill we're asking for is the minimum necessary for us to bring the house into FEMA compliance, and also for the drainage and septic system, which is actually located in this area, to be able to function properly. If you have any questions, be happy to address any of them. God bless you.
This is to the north of the other property?
Correct. JV 20 is right here, Lake Agawam, and then this is the curve.
Okay.
Over here's the Stern property, so this is the only portion that really falls within the wetlands line is over here.
Which you're doing nothing in.
Which I gotta come here, a little bit of grading, a little bit of planting. It's a nice way to end the night.
Chick?
We had previously delineated the wetlands, and they're correctly shown on the survey. I think the graphic that Melissa has that shows the jurisdiction area kind of speaks for itself. It's across the street, and it is an area of really minimal jurisdiction with very limited activity, a small amount of fill, and native plantings. So it's the first time we're hearing it, but there's really no comments or anything specific that I have.
You have anything, Rick? No. Anybody out in the audience? Guess not.
We got another close for decision.
Yeah.
We got a lot of decisions to do next month.
I move we close for decision.
Second.
All in favor?
Thank you very much.
Start writing them tomorrow. Well, no, some of them are yours.
Yeah, there are. Not a lot of time between work session and board meeting.
Seven of them close for decision so far.
On the application of case number 2857, Gregory Pamel, 27 Cameron Street.
I am Debbie Kropf. I'm the architect for 27 Cameron Street, and I have the affidavits of posting and mailing. This is the second project you have this evening of a residential project within a village business. So we are asking, because it's pre-existing non-conforming, we've come before you. The existing residence is 1,800 square feet. We are adding just shy of 50% of that. It's 867, or 897 square feet we're adding. The other variance we're asking for is because we're not extending the full width of the property. It's a variance for that, and also village business asks that you be 3 feet from the property line, and obviously the existing residence is already set back 26 feet, and the addition is set back further from the addition, the front of the house. So there's a small addition to one side, which a little mudroom, and that is, I think that was 45 feet back, and the dimension, it's not on this survey, it was on the other one, but we changed the dimension on the side, so I can't, it was, one was 36 feet, and I believe one was 45 feet. (36.5 feet) and 45.5 feet. And I did have, when I sent out the notice, I had a meeting, I invited all the neighbors to come and look at the plans to see if they had any objections. And I had a little list, and several people showed up to see the plans. Only one person decided to sign. They said they didn't have any objections, but they didn't want to put their name to anything. So it didn't seem like there was any objection to the project. But I've been here before, and neighbors come out of the woodwork with objections.
Where's the side yard setback in this area? This zone?
The village business has no side yard setback.
Oh, okay,
That's
this
the-
isn't village business.
This isn't
Okay.
village business, yes. And there is nothing that states what a residence should be when it's in village business, because it's very rare. In fact, when I spoke with Tim, he said, "Oh, you're one of the first ones." He said, "I think somebody else is coming in too," which
You
was-
just saw one.
Which we
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
saw one,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
These properties are more valuable as residential and
Just a statement saying that they don't object, and I'm one of the neighbors.
Well, Cameron Street, except once you get past the bank in Bellingham, is all residences.
There are two houses on Cameron Street that are in village business. This house is, there's a house in between this one and Fellingham's.
Right,
And then that's the end of village business, and it's
right.
all
And you
in
got the bank on the corner, and then you got the sound,
Well, it used to be Charos
Charos.
Sound, but it's no longer, it's an office building. In fact, the owner of that office building came over to look at the plans, to see what was going on.
and everything else all the way down the street is all residents.
Everything's residence.
Do you have any questions?
Parking regulations for this?
Well, there are 3 spots in the driveway, and there is also an existing garage.
So you need 4, you got 5 bedrooms, right? So you need
It's a
4.
4-bedroom house.
4, so you only need
Existing
3.
garage is the cabana?
Yeah.
So it's not a garage?
Well, it does have a garage space. I didn't,
It's a 2-car garage, it looks like.
no, it is a cabana and a garage. So let's change something on this. There's, the right-hand side is a garage.
It's a garage, yeah.
Yeah.
And you got 2 spaces in the driveway.
Well, there's actually room for 3. There's 3 spaces in the driveway.
You only need 3, though.
We only need 3. It's an existing 4-bedroom house already. And what we're doing is expanding it so that there's 2 of the bedrooms are becoming bathrooms. It's an existing 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom house. It's going to be a 4-bedroom, 4.5-bathroom house when it's done. So some of the bedrooms, 2 of the bedrooms are very tiny, and those are becoming bathrooms. And then the expansion is going to make larger bedrooms.
Nick, do you have any questions?
Only one question. Some of the variances they're asking for, it's similar to the one we had earlier tonight. They are regulations that are designed for the commercial areas of the village. So, excuse me. So, again, we'd have to be careful we write this up so it doesn't amount to a precedent. My only question was, similar to the other one, you're taking advantage of commercial setbacks from for residential use. And I was just, so I see you're going to have a 2-story addition that's going to be 5 feet from the neighbor to the west.
Yes.
I have no idea, I don't know what's on the property to the west. For some reason in my file that I got, what we got at the work session, I had a survey of property in East Hampton.
Oh.
Did you get a?
I don't think I got that.
No.
Tonight we got a survey of this property.
Yes, well, there was a survey. The difference, actually, we reduced that addition to the west. So was a new survey that was put in today, because the surveyor just got it to me, because it was actually going to be a little bit larger, and then we realized we were over.
Well,
Not only-
without the survey, I was unable to be sure which
Okay,
property this was, so
I'm sorry, you got the wrong survey.
so I'm just wondering is
There
the property
is-
to the west a house?
Yes.
Yes, there is a house to the west, and it
Close
is,
to that, is it close to the line, or?
it is close to the line. I don't know how far, but it's at least, it's very close to the line. It's, it's probably about 5 feet from the property line, maybe 6.
It was something that was handed in just today?
The survey, it shows that it's 12 feet instead of 13
Mine's not
feet.
dated. Is this the same as yours?
It says down here revised 1/21/15.
So this is not the one?
No.
Yeah.
What was the revision?
Well, the addition to the west had originally been 13 feet, and we reduced it to 12 feet. So the setback actually is larger. It's 6.5 feet. It had been 5.5 feet. So we're actually making it further away from the property line.
The new one didn't make the file.
I have a copy. Oh.
You have one?
A stamp, yes.
Have a new one?
I do. But they gave her 8 copies today.
Well, they got them, but it didn't make the main file. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, so that should show 5 there now, right?
Right.
Instead of 4.
And then 6'6" there instead
And
of
6
5.
foot 6 there, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's got 11 plus or minus. Huh.
It's on the east side?
Yes.
That's the driveway.
Yeah. But there's an addition there.
Yeah, there's an apron there.
It's a little mudroom on that side, on the driveway side.
How many bathrooms in this house now? 2?
There's 2 bathrooms, 2 full bathrooms.
You're gonna have 4.5 when you're done?
Yes.
Is the septic gonna be upgraded?
No, because the number of bedrooms are the same, and you may have upgraded it previously, but it's not an issue because it's the bedroom count, not the bathroom count that they look at.
Anything else?
That was my only question, whether you wanted to ask her to get you a survey of what's on the property to the west. If you've seen it, maybe you don't need it. I haven't seen it.
There's a house there, and then there's Bellingham's after the house, before the house.
But the house in between was redone a couple of years ago. It's nice.
I think so, and I think they're still, periodically, they're doing work on it.
Yeah.
It's an elderly woman who owns it, and the niece and nephew we're fixing it up for her.
Nobody in the audience, I guess.
Nobody in the
we-
audience.
Guess we can close this.
You want to do the same with this one?
Yep.
We're going to close this one for decision.
I move we close it for decision.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you.
I move we adjourn this session of the Southampton Village Zoning Board of Appeals.
Turn the camera off.